One view is this. The main reason we aren't currently being decimated by terrorists is that the government's anti-terror efforts have been successful. The alternative interpretation is that the terrorist just isn't that high, and we are greatly overspending on fighting it, or at least appearing to fight it. For most government officials, there's much more pressure to look like you are trying to stop terrorism than there is to actually stop it. The head of the TSA can't be blamed if a plane gets shot down by a shoulder-launched missile, but he's in serious trouble if a tube of explosive toothpaste takes down a plane. Consequently, we put much more effort into the toothpaste, even though it is probably a much less important threat. Likewise, an individual at the CIA isn't in trouble if a terrorist attack happens. He or she is only in trouble if there's no written report that details the possibility of such an attack, which someone else should have followed up on, but never did because there are so many such reports. My guess is that the second scenario, the terrorism threat just isn't that great, is the more likely. Which, if you think about it, is an optimistic view. But that probably still makes me a moron, a traitor, or both.
How about a war on taxes? David Cay Johnston, who does an incredible job covering U.S. tax policy and other business issues for the New York Times, reports that the IRS is outsourcing the collection of back taxes to third parties, aka collection agencies. The private debt collection program is expected to bring in $1.4 billion over 10 years, he writes, with the collection agencies keeping about $330 million of that, or 22 to 24 cents on the dollar. Maybe that seems like too big a cut to surrender, and maybe people will be worried about the collection agencies having access to their financial records. But what's most striking to me is that the IRS knows who owes the money, and they know where to find it, but because it is understaffed, can't afford to collect it. So it has to hire someone else to do it at a stiff price. The IRS admits that external collection is far more expensive than internal collection. Former Commissioner Charles O. Rosati once told Congress that if the IRS hired more agents, it could collect more than $9 billion each year and spend only $296 million, or about 3 cents on the dollar, to do so, Johnston writes. Even if Rosati was exaggerating by a factor of 5, the government would still be getting a better deal by hiring more agents than by contracting to a third party that takes a 22% cut. But Congress, which oversees the IRS budget, is famously reluctant to give the agency more resources to do its job. We touched on this subject in a Times column of our own. A main task of any IRS commissioner is to beg Congress and the White House for resources. For all the obvious appeal of having the IRS collect every dollar owed to the government, it is just as obviously unappealing for most politicians to advocate a more vigorous IRS. Michael Dukakis tried this during his 1988 presidential campaign and, well, it didn't work. Left to enforce a tax code that no one likes, upon a public that knows it can practically cheat at will, the IRS does its best to fiddle around the edges. Why does Congress act as it does? Maybe our congressmen are a bunch of history buffs, so imbued with the spirit of our republic that they remember the Boston Tea Party too well and are scared of how the populace might revolt if they ramp up tax enforcement. But keep in mind that we are talking about tax enforcement here, which is the IRS's job, not tax law, which is Congress's responsibility. In other words, Congress is happy to set the tax rates that it does, but it doesn't want to be seen as giving too much comfort to the bad cops who have to go out and collect those tax dollars. So maybe they need to relabel their effort to get all the tax money that is owed. Since Congress approves so much money for the war on terror and the war on drugs, maybe it's time for them to launch a war on taxes. Well, really, a war on tax cheats. What if they could demonize the tax cheats so thoroughly, emphasizing that the tax gap, the difference between taxes owed and money collected, is about the size of the federal deficit? Would that make it more politically palatable to give the IRS the resources to collect the money that is owed? Maybe they could put pictures of tax cheats on milk cartons, on flyers at the post office, even on America's Most Wanted. Would that do the trick? Would a properly managed war on tax cheats fix the problem? For now,